Thanks everybody for being here. This is a special night, and as Ken had mentioned, he began his full-time employment with the American Philatelic Society 30 years ago in 1995, and has worn a number of hats beautifully at the organization. He worked in the circuit sales department, was the society's youth coordinator, the APS show director, executive director, chief operating officer, now director of expertizing. Forgive me if I forgot any hats that you have also worn, Ken. He's a gold medal exhibitor and a national judge. He'll be judging at this September's Greater Houston Stamp Show. And Martin is one of the most popular people in U.S. stamp collecting, and I'd like to quickly add a personal note here. When I made my first visit to the APS in 2012, I too had been a member since 1982, and I went there in 2012 to begin work on my Buffalo Cinderellas book. I met Ken that day, and he extended a warm hand, and every time that I've seen him, he's been a friendly face that has helped me and encouraged my work ever since. So thank you so much for being here tonight. We are thrilled to have you with us in our Houston Philatelic Society Zoom meeting. It's all yours, Ken.
Thanks very much, Rick. And I don't know if you should have invited me to be a judge because the last two times that you've invited me to judge at your show, the shows have either been canceled or the flights were canceled because of hurricanes or other things. I did judge at the Greater Houston the second year of your colors, I believe. I can't remember. I didn't go back to see how many years ago that was. Phil Steger was, I think, the chief judge, and I don't remember if there was a third. That had to be at least 15 or 20 years ago. I've been scheduled twice since then. The one time I know the show wasn't even held, and the other time the show might have been held, but there weren't any planes flying that would get me there, so I couldn't get there. So I'm looking forward to being there. And the Greater Houston Stamp or the Houston Stamp Club was also important in helping to host our Stamp Expo there in 98, I believe, going back a few years. The winter show, perhaps the first one that had the single frame champion of champions, I think, maybe. So I've known a lot of people and I see a few familiar faces, and I'm very happy to be with you tonight. I'm going to share a PowerPoint. It's not particularly long. This is meant to be informal. So please feel free to just interrupt. If you prefer putting something in the chat, I will try to watch it, although it may be the end before I see it. Um, so feel free to speak out. But we're going to talk a little bit about expertizing in the American Philatelic Expertizing Service. Basically, our department is two people. Sharon Shawley has been as the expertizing coordinator for a couple years. She replaced Crystal Harder, who some of you may know, who was in the position for in her position like 30 years before that. And I've been the expertizing director since July 2020. This is actually a picture. That's me when I was a little bit younger. That would have been at Ameripex 86. So I would have been what would have I been? 21 years old, I guess, at that point in time. A lot thinner, wearing a t-shirt that says collect stamps that you probably can't read at that point in time. And actually did back in May to August 1985, over the summer, that'd be the summer between my junior and senior year of high school. Actually, at that point, organized our first 112,000 expertizing certificates by country and Scott catalog number. Um, but expertizing, or the concern about counterfeits, fakes, forgeries, has been an issue since the society was founded in 1886. This is a quote from the 100th anniversary um, uh, of the society, where there were stories serially in the American Philatelist. But at the first convention, which was September 14, 1886, it was said that two problems that plagued the organization in its early days were the selection and support of a journal. We went with the American Philatelist. which was published in Altoona, Pennsylvania, only about probably 45, 50 miles from Belfont, beginning in January 1887. Um, and the regular appearance of fraudulent stamps. Um, there was actually no decision on the American Philatelist at that first meeting, but there was an action on the fraudulent stamps as a counterfeit detector was elected at the first meeting of the society. Um, and we had even early on um, an expertizing, authenticating. This is an early certificate from 1906. A lot different, no photographs. So how would you match it up to the stamp? But it was signed by quite a group of luminaries. You may recognize some of the five that I listed there. There's a couple others that don't stand out quite as much. So why would you want to have an item authenticated or expertized? There's a variety of reasons. Um, Probably for most people, the biggest one would be to avoid financial loss and disappointment. You don't want to spend a lot of money for a stamp and find out that it's not what it's represented to be. Um, the APS does offer a limited 5-year guarantee as well. Um, that you make sure that you have proper identification of paper, color, watermark, grills, other aspects. Um, in more recent times, where gum never hinged can mean a big difference, especially for early stamps. Is the gum original? Has it ever been hinged? Is it regummed? Has a cancel been removed? Those are important questions. Um, does the stamp been repaired or had hidden flaws? Um, and that could be, has it been reperforated? Maybe purse were trimmed off so the sheet stamp resembles a coil or a perforated stamp that's worth more. And finally, it's generally going to be much easier to sell an item that's a certificate attesting to its genuineness. Some cases you may more than make up for the cost of the certificate with the increased price or the increased ease of selling an item. So when should an item be expertized? I mean, there may be items that you would like to expertise. There are fakes and forgeries that exist in greater number than the genuine stamp, but even uncommon stamps that might only have a catalog value of under $10. Unfortunately, that probably doesn't make sense for low value stamps, although there are some people. I talked to somebody today. I told them, your stamp you're looking at is only has a catalog value of $20. I'm not sure it makes financial sense to get it expertized because our minimum fee, even for a member, is $25 plus the cost of postage both ways. But they were seriously thinking, said they had gotten some that it didn't make financial sense, but they wanted to make sure that what they had was legitimate. But in general, if a catalog includes a warning that counterfeits, forgeries, or reprints are abundant, that's a, a good reason or certainly incentive. In general, when the same image exists in a stamp with a much lower value. I mean, Washington Franklin's are certainly one of the greatest areas of people wanting stamps expertise because of all the varieties. The 1 2 cent red Washington, I think there are 40 different catalog numbers. And a few of them would be as little as a 25-cent catalog value, and some would be much, much more expensive, obviously. Um, and this also can include there are stamps with proofs that are less expensive than than the stamp. That's a little bit unusual, but certainly not unknown. And proofs can be shaved down or perforated to appear as a genuine stamp. Generally, they often look too good, almost. Stamps with overprints and surcharges, that's typically one of the most common things forged. Um, Easiest things to do in many cases. So if there's a big difference with a stamp with the overprint or surcharge versus one without, that's probably a good candidate. If it's claimed to be an error, like a missing color or even missing perforations may be harder to hide, but there um, could be some perforation indentations which wouldn't qualify it for an error. But that's generally less common. But certainly color missing, there's lots of stamps that people either intentionally with chemicals or unintentionally leaving them in sunlight, one or more color may fade or just about completely disappear. Um, so if you think it's an error there, whoops, didn't mean to do that, that might be a good candidate. Um, Used stamps, they're significantly more valuable than the same stamps in unused condition. Um, German inflationary issues of 1923, 22, 23 would be a good example there, where in many cases, most of the stamps were never actually used because the rates went up so quickly. You couldn't put, 100,000, 40 Pfennig stamps on a letter to pay the 4 million mark rate with the greater inflation or whatever. So many of them were never used. Maybe as many were used for um, heating a house as actually for postage. And the unused stamps are in most cases pretty common, while there aren't too many of the inflation issues that on a cover properly used, paying the appropriate rate wouldn't be worth in the $10 range, in some cases much, much more than that. We sort of said when the stamps claim to be an error. I think we got everything on that page. Well, and the German inflation would be also an example of covers that are significantly more valuable than, well, not necessarily than the used stamps. It's hard to, the German inflationary ones, it's going to be hard to get a good certificate for used in many cases if they're not on cover. But certainly there are covers with either because of the rate that's being paid or the markings, whether it be a fancy cancel or an unusual destination or something like that are worth much more than a used stamp that's off cover. I mentioned stamps with a substantial premium for being never hinged. And just the general, if the stamp represents a significant investment to you, you probably want to make sure that it's legitimate. Our basic expertizing process, this is a form we've had around for many years. Sometimes we get ones that are from 30 years earlier. They'll have the state college address instead of the Bellefonte address. They'll have an old fee schedule, but you can still use them as long as you send them to the right place and pay the appropriate current fee schedule. Um, and this is also available in a abbreviated format downloadable from our website that will print on 8.5 by 11. If you're doing a lot, we like to send you the forms because they're perforated. They'd be separated more easily for what we keep and what's returned to you. But there's basically a couple pages here which we ask you to fill out. Mount the item if it fits here. This is for experts. We have 4 columns in this one. Most of our items are going to go to 2 external experts. If they disagree, they could go to more, and or they may be looked at by myself, Bill Dixon, or other people internally. The experts may use this to indicate where a watermark is, or a thin, something on the front or the back. There's a couple boxes there. And general fee schedule and rules are on the reverse side. Sort of a process. That's Crystal, the former expertizing coordinator, and the scanner in front. But basically, we take them out of the envelope. The first thing we do is scan them. Um, Scan the items. Um, then we have about 180 experts. Um, they are not here in Bellefonte. They're across the United States for the most part. I'll call consultants. Our insurance basically doesn't cover us sending items outside the country. So we do not send them to experts in other countries. However, there are a few people that may look at a scan and in some cases can provide some help in expertizing. They're not going to likely be able to tell me whether it's re-gummed or something like that, but they may be able to, with a high quality scan, determine if an overprint is genuine, or um, they may be able to do some help. So we've used some people when we have trouble with getting enough good experts in the US on a consultant basis who are outside the country as well. But most of our experts will only do one country. Some will only do one issue or one series in a country or a period of time. But um, and most of the experts have been, studied the stamps that they're doing for probably 30, 40, 50 years. Um, they are paid, but $2 an item they look at. So they're essentially volunteer by the time they need to take it back to the post office and should at least cover their gas and so forth. Um, but it's pretty much a volunteer service. We ask that they review the items and return within 5 days. Um, some may only get a couple items. There are some experts, somebody like Ken Strail, who expertises not only for us, but the Philatelic Foundation, and maybe expertise for more than one of the expertizing services. Some may be able to handle relatively large quantities of items. Most would get probably 5 to 10 to 15 at a time. But there's a few US or other areas where they might get more than that at a time. This is just a spreadsheet basically where we have countries and who we have as experts. This is probably out of date. You can see we have people added and stickies on here and so forth. And um, it's constantly evolving. Unfortunately, we face the challenge, and most of our experts are older, and some of them are in poor health, and trying to find replacements and groom replacements can be a challenge. I just picked out one item here. This went to three experts: Steve Unkridge, Mike Gerard, and Dennis Gilson. And you can two of them provide there's a column for them to each indicate, and it looks like all three of, well, let's see, they all three said it was not 387 what was submitted as. The first person said 374. The second and third person said it's a 383. All said it's used. First person said the perforations were trimmed off. The second said it had fake perforations. Second and third said it had fake perforations and that it had been altered to look like a coil. All three said the edges are not parallel. And two and three gave some explanation for um, how they came up with what they thought. These records are kept permanently at the APS. Um, we can pull out just earlier, well, I guess it was last week, somebody asked for who had expertised an item um, that they own from, it was expertised like 40 years ago. That one was Dick Champagne and Stanley Pillar. It was like a 114B, I think. They said the one without the grill, but we pulled it out of the records. Um, from about 2004 on, the records are digitized essentially, or we have at least limited information, including photos digitally from about 2004. But earlier items, we just have hard copies, which would include in many cases, on some cases, there's a 35 millimeter picture. Some cases, it was a Polaroid picture. Many of those Polaroid pictures have faded badly over the years and certainly would not be an accurate representation of color today. But we still keep those records. So after we get back from that, when we're satisfied with enough experts, in this case, it's very likely I went with the two over the two of the three. Um, opinion's typed, it's printed, we emboss it. The opinion's signed by me, Bill Dixon, who's in our circuit sales, and Sharon will both review everything. Try to make sure we answered any questions that people ask specifically on there, address their concerns. And then typically, if somebody sent multiple items in, we would mail them back as a group, because it certainly saves considerable money. Now, if they were all washed in Franklin's, then they would likely be finished at the same time and gone to the same people. If there were some washed in Franklin's and some 1850 stamps, those are going to go to U.S. stamps. Those are going to go to different people, or different countries. They'll go to different people. So you're basically not going to get them back till the last one is completed. Some could be completed much quicker. If there's a lot of disagreement, they can take considerably longer, unfortunately. And refunds or any additional charges would be done when it's determined. For a member, and typically for anybody, we don't like to collect more than $35 for a member in advance, because in many cases, um, people are optimistic and they don't turn out to be the valuable stamp that they hope. And it costs us more in time and money, like credit card fees. Yes, you charge credit card fees not only when you initially charge it, but you get another fee if you have to process a refund. So would prefer not to do refunds. It's better for us to collect less in advance, and any balance collect at the end, charging additional money, especially if it's something like a claim 596. I have not seen, since I've been expertizing director, we have not had an item come back as a Scott 596. We probably, I hear from almost one person a day, sometimes multiple people a day, who claim they have a 596, for example. That'd be a $250,000 stamp. There's only 15 of them known. Most of them are either the flat plate 552 or the perf 11 by 10 and a half 632 versus the 596. 594s are very rarely genuine as well, just from experience. Let's see. This is what the certificate would look like. Again, the Scott 54 used paper adherence to reverse. We, much more than some of our competitors, try to note any flaws. Some people would say we're more friendly to collectors. Um, some of the dealers may not want all the flaws that we would noted, like short perfs or other things. But we try to, if it's not terribly obvious, or even if it is obvious, if it's torn, we're going to say it's torn, even if you can see it. You can track items that you've submitted to the APS. If you're a member and you go on to My APS and My Certificates, you can see here's just somebody's brought up, and here it says not yet rendered, but they can see the stamps here, return to owner. They can click on view and view the opinion. Anybody can also use, I guess I have that later, but how many items does the APS expertise? I need to update this a little bit. But we've been in the $4,500 $4,500 a year range for the last few years. Pretty steady overall. Certificate archive, anybody can access this. So if you want, you could go on and you could type in the search criteria I put over here was United States, Scott 1. And this would be just from 2004 to date, which it says right here. Looks like we've expertised 626 of them. And you could go through, look at each one. You can click on it for Zoom. It's going to tell you the opinion date. And you could narrow that. So if you wanted only number ones that were covers or only ones that were used, it's going to search on what it's found to be, not how it's submitted. Who are our experts? They tend to be very established people in the hobby who have been in the hobby for a long time. A number of them are dealers. We have to be a little bit careful in some cases, especially in some dealers that are very specialized. So, for example, Jay Smith is probably the foremost Scandinavian dealer in the US. We can't have him giving an opinion on any of the stamps he's sold. Sometimes we don't know. Sometimes we will send him something that he has sold, and he'll send back saying, "This was purchased for me." You need to find two other people. Um, but dealers handle a lot of stamps. There's people like Stanley Pill or Dick Champagne, who I mentioned earlier. They've both passed away now, but among the foremost experts on early 19th century U.S. stamps. So just because they're dealers, they're not disqualified. Many are authors, have published articles on the areas that they expertise. Many are exhibitors. Typically, they're active in an APS affiliate or specialty group in their area, whether it be the Classic Society or if they're, French expert, France and Colony Society, something like that. Um, Many, in fact, I think I did the slide down here, which shows, or the picture down here, which shows a sign of left scroll by Quesadema, because every single person in there, and that's from a few years ago, at one point in time was an expert of the APS. They are all Luff Award winners too. That's Harlan Stone, who's passed away, and Steve Schumann, and Dan Walker, and Randy Neal, and Bob Onelel, and Quesadema. And at one point in time, all of them, most of them are not current. Actually, I don't believe any of them are current expertisers for us, but they all were at one point. Um, Tom Bienasek, I think this is showing him from Volunteer Work Week. He does Austria, Poland, and a couple Latin American, South American countries. John Barwis, Victoria Half-Lengths. He can also do some U.S. postal history. Um, Here's Guatemala. Mark Banchik does Mexico, for example. So those are just a few people, but many of them are well known. Some are behind the scenes and not as well known. Probably well known still by collectors in their area, but not as well through the hobby. Just a few tools that most experts hopefully would have and would be using depending upon what they are. I have a Kuselich or United States Specialist gauge that measures perforations based on thousandths of an inch. So there's actually three different gauge 10 US perforations, whether it's 79, 80, or 81 thousandths of an inch, basically, um, versus 10 perforations per 2 centimeters. Um, and many people who would do fake perforations would not realize the difference, and this could easily catch the difference there. Um, in my opinion, watermark fluid is still better than an electronic. I do have uh, uh, electronic. I've used a variety of other watermark detectors, but watermark fluid is um, generally better than anything else, in my opinion. Um, my favorite magnifier is actually probably the one I use the most. It's just a very simple one. This is 8 power. But for some things, this is a 30 power one as well. Um, this is an ultraviolet light. This has independent shortwave and long wave. Long wave can be important for trying to detect removed cancels. They'll often show up under the long wave. The short wave is primarily for US tag stamps. Um, Catalogs now, for United States, probably Scott, but around me, I can look and see Facet catalog. I can see Mickle catalogs. I have a Zumstein catalog. I have the United States Post or the United Postal Stationery Society, 19th century, 20th century stamped envelopes and postal cards. I have a Gibbons. Of course, um, I have a Sterling. I have the Unitrade for Canada. So a variety of different catalogs depending upon the area. There's a number of forgery guides, so to speak, like the Saran guide, which the APS published. There's a lot of other ones. Before we even got started, somebody asked about, I think it was 183 vermilion and reddish vermilion. And this is a page from the R.H. White Encyclopedia of Colors, something like that. What's it called? Encyclopedia of the Colors of United States Postage Stamps. That's out of print. Pretty expensive on the secondary market. If you can find a copy for $600, you're probably doing well. But that's probably the next to actual stamps. And of course, we have the reference collection behind me, over 600 volumes of genuine stamps and about 150 volumes of fakes and forgeries, which are important tools for us. Not too often, but this is a micrometer, measure the thickness of paper. There are thin and thick paper varieties. Um, that's not going to work if the stamp's on a cover, probably. And you need to make sure any all hinge remnants or other things, and the thickness will even vary whether it's used or has its gum. The gum thickness is basically detectable by something like this. So those are a few of the tools. Um, some of our competition, Philatelic Foundation is very respected. They're in New York City. Um, Several of their experts are experts for us. Larry Lyons, their executive director, normally gets almost all our locals, as he's probably the best person for U.S. locals in the U.S. I would say they cater a little bit more to dealers. They offer an expedited service. I think many of their items only get looked at by one person. We try to have two people. Their focus is much more in the US. They do worldwide. At one point, Sergio Sismondo did much of their worldwide, but that's a small percent for them. For us, worldwide is about 35% of the items we get, and the remaining US. For them, it's at least 80% of their submissions is US. They offer grading for an additional fee. Professional Stamp Experts, which is in the Las Vegas area, or PSE, primarily does United States material. They focus a lot on grading. Um, their base fee is 5% of Scott value plus shipping. Um, Ours are less than that, basically. And many of the other services will charge more for shipping. We just charge exact cost. PSAG, or Philatelic Stamp Authentication and Grading, is in the Miami area. Most of the things are done by one or two people. Um, Professional stamp experts use a very small number of people too, because they're primarily US. Um, for Canada, British North America, we have a good relationship with the Vincent Graves Green Foundation. There are items that we're not certain about that we may decline opinion and suggest that the person submit to them. They really only do Canada and British North America, but they are very good. They also have a VSC. They actually have a VSC 8000. Um, the APS and the Virtual Spectral Comparator, APS and the Philatelic Foundation have VSC 6000s. The National Postal Museum also has a VSC 8000. They don't do expertizing, but their machine is available by appointment for basically any researcher. Some of the advantages for APS is we offer a discount for APS members, and even the non-member price is typically lower than our competitors. We expertise the world. We're the only one really with a guarantee. By far the largest pool of experts. We try to have virtually all items reviewed by more than one expert. We get some things that, cut out from the FIPEX souvenir sheet or whatever, and they think it's a color error of US #1 or whatever. We're not going to send that out to people. So there are things that we don't send out to two experts. That's going to be just done in-house. But we try to have everything, hopefully get two good external experts. I think we have the largest reference collection, certainly worldwide. We treat all submissions the same. Some people could say that's good or bad. And we charge actual shipping costs. That's another picture of what's basically behind me from a slightly different angle. Um, but as it says, there are 40 albums just for the United States. Our reference collection's used primarily for expertizing, but we'll also, if somebody thinks something's misidentified that's been put in the stamp store and hip stamp, um, we use that for comparisons. Every month we pull items for the American Philatelist, or every week we pull items for the Stamp of the Week video I've been doing for the past year. Um, we have used it for forged or genuine, which we're not actively doing right now, but there's probably 100 or so of those on our website still. And it's available for viewing by the public. Somebody came in today and wanted to see our Hungry collection. We're happy to share it. Now, it's not complete. We rely completely on donations of material. We have no acquisition budget. We have a little bit of budget for supplies, but for the most part, we've gotten all the albums, the pages, the mounts, even the labels for the albums, generally speaking, donated. It's getting a little bit hard to get Amos Media, Lens to donate some of those things now. We recently got a $1,000, $1,500 donation to help us with some of those supplies and so forth. So we appreciate when people are generous and help us to be able to house what we have. Just for your information, also out of the expertizing department basically is the estate advisory service. It's administered. It's intended for heirs of members who have passed away within the past 12 months. I think one or two of you here might actually be on our volunteer committee of a few hundred people. Typically, if we're contacted, it's supposed to be a last resort. Ideally, the collectors, we try to get them to make plans, explain to their heirs what they have, even identify potential auction houses or buyers or whatever before they pass. But too many people don't for whatever reasons. So it provides not a formal appraisal, but some help for heirs who've inherited collections who probably have no idea what they have. Um, yeah, that's the 203 advises about 50 requests per year. That's probably still very accurate. So then the other thing that the expertizing department gets is lots and lots of phone calls every single day saying they have valuable stamps. Some it must be valuable, it's old. And people's idea of old, I've had people claim this stamp's from the 1980s. It has to be worth a fortune. It's ancient. Most of us would not think of that as being, or it's from my grandfather's collection, so it has to be real, even though it says fake or reprint on the back of the item. Um, or I saw the same picture offered in the internet for thousands of dollars. Yeah, the same illustration, but one's a coil and one's a sheet stamp, or one has a grill and one doesn't have a grill, or a different watermark, and most of them don't understand that. So it's, trying to be polite and providing a little bit of education. But some of the questions I'll ask, okay, how was the material acquired? Is it found in an attic, purchased at a thrift store? People purchase things at a yard sale or a thrift store and then think they have millions of dollars. They paid $5. Well, not very likely. Was it inherited? If it was inherited, how was the collection acquired? Did the person actually spend money on this collection or just rip stamps off of envelopes? They purchased stuff at auction. Did they have insurance? If somebody inherits a collection that's not even mentioned in the will, probably it's not a major asset. Um, Hopefully, if it's worth hundreds of thousands of dollars like you think it is, the owner would probably have it insured. And they probably wouldn't have it in a baggie with stamps of 10 other countries. Um, those are some of the things. Now, if it was kept in a safety deposit box, probably a better chance that it's actually worth something. So this is a bad illustration really of the 596 because I don't think the color is very good. But That's one of the most common ones. Like I say, almost every day we hear from somebody who believes they have a 596 because, there's two others that basically look the same. Catalog value 25 cents versus the 596 with a catalog value of $250,000. There's only 15 known copies of 596. 10 of them have the Kansas City, Missouri pre-cancel. The other five, I believe, all were canceled in the Kansas City area in 1923 or 1924. So, where was it canceled? Oh, it's on a postcard that was sent from New York City. Well, unless somebody purchased the stamps in Kansas City, which is the only area it was thought they were sold, it's not likely they're going to be used to send them a postcard from New York City, or it's, used in 1930. Well, all of them that we know are from 23 or 24. But, and it's not just it can't, there's more options between 552 and 632. Those are the most common that it turns out to be, but could be any of these others. Some of the things that, they'll say, oh, it does perf 11, but they don't even know what perf 11 means. They may have counted the perforations rather than use something to measure 2 centimeters. Some of the things that I'll ask to try to ascertain whether there's even any faint hope that it could be a 596. Um, and then another one that people always want to think that they have, and this is a page from the R.H. White book. Not much difference here, and maybe not great reproduction, but everybody submits items as 64. Most of them are actually 65s. Not much different between, and many of them want it to be the pigeon blood, not pigeon book, but pigeon blood pink. Um, that's actually a misprint in the R.H. White book, I believe, the K versus the D there. Um, but that's another one because there's, the 65 is a catalog value of $3 in multiple different shades, while any 64 is used catalog value, when I did this at least $140 to over $4,000 for the pigeon blood pink. Lots of people submit 300s where the perforations have been trimmed off the two sides. They think they have a 316. Many cases, there's basically no margin on the two sides. The first thing that would be done is, will this stamp that they say is a 316 fit inside the perforations of a 300? A few people who know a little bit more, claim they have a Z grill. Probably only get 2 or 3 of those per month, not every day. Um, and then other ones, Elvis Presley, it has to be worth a fortune. I tell them, do they know how many were printed? 550 million at a time when there were about 300 million people in the US. So about 2 copies of that stamp for everybody in the US. Sorry, hold it as long as you want. It's never going to be real valuable. Or they see a stamp, if they can read German or whatever, that may say 500 billion marks. Well, this has to be worth a fortune. No, probably not, especially not unused. So that's just a general overview. I've spoken way too long. What questions? What can I do to help you, or what can I answer for you? I don't see anything in chat.
Okay.
Go ahead, John.
I'm wondering, the one that you ended up with was the shades of 64 and 65.
Yep.
Um, how do expertisers allow for the effects of age or other factors over time that could modify the color from what it originally was?
Well, you can, um, I would start with a cheap stamp, but you can often restore the color with a hydrogen peroxide solution, very small percentage of hydrogen peroxide. But they're
Okay.
going to have to go with what they see. And some of them may say, this has been sulfurized. It might have started out, but there's no way we can give it a certificate as being pink today. You
Okay.
can't. We can use a VSC, which will look at reflection and absorption, but that's going to be impacted by age or dirt or
Yeah.
other things as well. It's not a, it's not a destructive method. We don't want a destructive method, that would actually sample the inks or something. So that's not any, you can't necessarily get it from there. So it's basically the color that it is today is what you have to, now you're not going to have something that's, um, if it, if it ages to that color, um, experts will basically generally going to be conservative. You need to have proof that it's the more valuable stamp. You
Okay.
assume it's the less valuable stamp, generally speaking,
Okay. Thank you.
especially when we're offering a guarantee.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Good question. Anybody else? Anything you'd like to ask? Stephen?
Comment. Yeah, so you were talking about how the people call in and they also think they have a valuable stamp. Well, the TSDA Stamp Wars the weekend before last, we saw something that never happens. A lady comes in with a frame full of I mean, literally a picture frame full of Confederate stamps that she bought at Goodwill for $10, and brings it around to a couple of the dealers, including some of y'all might have witnessed this. Charlie Deaton, who's
Yep.
an expert in Confederate stamps. Well, she sold that $10 frame to one of the dealers in the room for $2,500.
That's fantastic. It's good to hear about the
Unbelievable.
occasional story, but I'm afraid that's the rare exception versus the norm.
I just thought it was funny because
But
you
no,
hear
that's
what you're
wonderful
saying
when
all
it
the
does
time.
happen. It's not too common, but it's wonderful when it happens. I mean, I've looked at hundreds of collections over the years and can remember just a couple people who brought collections in here that I'm like, oh wow, hold it. I need tongs. I'm not handling these with my fingers, or I need some catalogs, or there's some real value here. Somebody brought in a mint never hinged set of the Colombians and didn't really realize they knew they had some value, but not as much as they realized. And um, and occasionally we find something. Sometimes it's only quasi-philatelic, but the spouse, widow of a Penn State professor donated a number of material that he had, and when we were sorting through it, we found a letter actually from, I believe was it Edison or Einstein? I think it was Edison, signed by him. I contacted her and we returned that. The rest of the rest of the huge accumulation probably didn't have more than $1,000 value, but I think that we were guessing that there was at least that much or more just in that one letter there. But that's again the exception, unfortunately, versus the norm.
Okay. Ken,
Yes.
is there a particular feature, color or overprint legitimacy or legitimate imperfs or something like that that's the most challenging that you think for an expertizing committee?
There's different things that are challenging in different areas, and most experts aren't in, all the areas. Some of the early Italian state stamps can be pretty challenging, in my opinion. I'm not an expert on that. We actually have one of our experts was in here today, doing work with our reference collection and organizing. And we're trying to get him to do a video. So I don't know if any of you saw the first X-Files video that Dennis Skilson did on the expertizing Washington Franklin's. That was released maybe a month ago or so. And I'm working on getting a few other experts. It's not going to go into detail, but a general overview of the things they use, the resources they use, and some of the how they do it. And Chris was talking about, a couple items he looked at that he thinks, but he flat out said, be sure that somebody else looks at this. I think it's this, but it needs to be looked at by another person.
Yeah.
And the best experts are not afraid to say that. Luke Hoffman, who worked for the foundation at one point in time, who's a a great expert for 20th century US stamps. I believe there was an IM last week that I was looking at that he said he feels pretty confident, but still make sure that somebody else looks at it who's knowledgeable. Um, there and mistakes can be made. And over time, we can learn more about some stamps and so forth. For at one period of time, Scott listed, quote, China clay papers and United States stamps. Those were all eliminated, basically. Um, Eventually, sometimes we learn things. So, a certificate from 40 years ago might not, but the catalog numbers may have changed in Scott. There's always occasionally some renumbering or relisting or changes in listing. And even listings can be deleted or added in a catalog as well. So you have to be careful with really old certificates that they would reflect and get the same thing today.
I got a question, Ken. Um, I've enjoyed over time writing about a couple different forgers from the 1890s.
Mhm.
Some of their stamps are really tough to find,
Yep.
and they can command a couple $100 a piece even or higher.
Yep.
What if someone either sent one in or they knowingly had one of those,
Mhm.
sent it in? Can they get a certificate that states it's a forgery from this guy, or does
Yep. Not frequently, but occasionally we will have people send it in and they want to know, is it a Fournier forgery or is it, a specific forgery? And yeah, there are some where the forgeries are worth more than the genuine stamps. There are people who collect, you know, counterfeit, more, I would say, completely counterfeit stamps versus, well, called forged stamps, where they've modified a genuine stamp to try to resemble a more valuable variety. I don't know too many people who collect the forged ones other than as, maybe one copy or something as a reference or something like that. But there are definitely people that collect stamps from a few counterfeiters that a Sperati or Fournier or something like that.
so would they come back to them with a certificate noting that?
If we can determine that, yes, absolutely.
I see. Okay. Last thing then. You showed a slide with the 1 cent green Franklin
Yep.
316, is it? Um, so if one had one of those that is not going to pass,
Mm-hmm.
is it, but are they collectible? If someone sent it in and they got a rejection notice, are there collectors that would want that?
Well, the 632 and the 552 are extremely common stamps. The catalog value is 25 cents, but realistically, if you wanted 100 copies, somebody would probably sell them to you for $1 or two, all 100 copies. There's minimal value on those. Now, there are some that are certainly intermediate value between the virtually no value and the $250,000 value. So there are some others that would be worthy. We're going to tell them exactly what it is. It's rotary press, yep, but it's perforated 11 by 10 and a half, so it's a 632, not the 596. Yes, it is perforated 11, but it's flat plate. And if you, one of the best resources is to have a flat plate and a rotary press from that series, and just to be able to match them up on the size. Um, doesn't have to, you should be able to figure out the flat plate is much more likely to have some offsetted ink on the back, but just because there's offset ink, that's not a guarantee it's flat plate, but it's much more likely flat plate. Um, and I mean, but yeah, and some people will say, don't even mail it to me, mail it back to me because it's not worth the return postage if it's a 632 or a 552.
Gotcha.
On those pink 64 55s,
Yep.
were those shades related to the composition of the ink? Okay, can XRF help in determining what the original stamp was?
The pink ones were issued earlier. Typically, I believe those were 1861s. But we didn't have the same ink formulations and consistency. This was before even the Bureau of Engraving and Printing, was doing it. Before you had, well, I don't want to say you didn't have security printers, and especially in Great Britain and so forth. But there was natural variance certainly. But the earlier ones tended to be the shades of pink, which is why it's the 64s and 64A and 64B, and the 65s tended to be more the rose pink, the less valuable shades. They exist in much larger quantities, which is basically the reason why the roses are in, I'm sorry, the pinks are in much smaller quantities, which is why they're more valuable. But many of these color changes like that were not intentional. Um, they happened. I mean, even have some, nobody's going to get rich off of them, or few people collect it, but during the time of the Americana series in the 1970s, they discovered some of the inks that were being used for postage stamps are basically carcinogenic. So they changed ink formulations and inks for a number of the Americana series stamps. So there's definitely shades in the Americanas, but being 1970 stamps, for the most part, they didn't even get separate catalog numbers. A few have like a minor designation, but we don't go into the same depth as we did for early US stamps. Scott doesn't have the same level, but that's something that certainly somebody could collect. So that was partly an intentional change there, but at that point in time, you had much higher. The Bureau of Engraving and Printing was doing it, stamps, they were doing currency, much higher level of security standard and standardization. Some color shades today or in the 80s when you had multiple printers of the same stamp could be because um, the different printers were using different ink suppliers, for example. Um, and how much difference do you need to be to justify a listing? I'm not sure Scott can even answer that. Although they have to make those decisions, or they do make those decisions. Um, I've never seen anything saying, it's 10% or it's X angstroms or anything like that that would determine whether they're getting a separate listing. Yeah, John.
Ken, it's Eric Levine.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, Eric Levine.
Okay.
A question. There's a dealer I know of. I deal mostly with Hawaiian
Yep.
stamps, and they have a number of the Grinnell um, um, counterfeits, but they seem to, I guess, I want to say they want to charge a premium because they're not sure if they're actually Grinnell's or the stamps because they're claiming they can't tell the difference. Can you really tell the difference? I guess I'm trying to determine.
Depends on, I think it depends upon who you ask. There's a long history
Yeah.
with the Grinnells. They've been studied by the Royal
Right.
in England. Um,
Right.
there's people that will disagree. We have two. Fred Gregory is one of our Hawaiian experts. Most of them he'll plate and even tell us the plate and position in some cases. I'm trying to remember the other, I believe, think Richard Malmgren will also do a lot, especially postal history, but also Hawaiian stamps. Those are the two that would be most likely, especially if it's something difficult that we would send to. They both do pretty good turnaround time as well, which is unfortunately there are some people that are great, but we can't use because it might take 8 weeks to get the stamp back from them, and that's too
Right.
long, especially if we want to send it to 2 or 3 people. So it's a combination that we need people who are qualified, but who also will get back to us, and hopefully if they're going on vacation, will tell us they're going on vacation, so we don't send them a stamp while they're on vacation, or if they're in the hospital, to let us know, and so forth. And some people are very dependable on that, and we use sometimes people that might not be quite as good, but we know we'll hear back and get and
But you think that they could possibly tell the difference
yes, yes, I
between
do.
the forgeries and the,
Yes.
okay, excellent.
That's
Thank you.
sorry, that was a very long way, but yes.
Yeah, okay, no.
I got
mean,
way off
yeah, I mean, it's,
topic.
yeah, I mean, it's, yeah. All right, I think I'll leave it there for right now. But thank you. That's good to know.
But that's an area where I would say there's still some controversy in the hobby.
Right.
I wouldn't say that it's 100% agreement on that issue. Some of the things we may have resolved, and catalog listings have been changed or whatever. We're closer to agreement in that area, but I wouldn't say the hobby is 100% united on that area.
Right. I've read, the research papers on them,
Yep.
but and I would agree. But if you're going to invest that kind of money, you'd like to know which way it's going.
Absolutely. I would personally, if I had the money, I would probably stay away from that area because I don't feel 100% certainty in that area for
Right.
a few stamps,
You're
a
right.
few very expensive stamps.
Right. Right. All right. Thank you.
Yep. John, did you have a question? Yeah. You're muted, I think. You're muted. You need to unmute.
Indeed. Okay.
Okay, now I can hear you.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Before expertising organizations and
Uh-huh.
certificates came along,
Yep.
a lot of supposed experts would sign or
Yep.
stamp on the back of the stamp their opinion that it was
Yep.
genuine. Do you get a lot of those coming in? And if so, are they basically reliable or?
We get a lot. You have to be worried. There's actually people that forge the expert signatures on the back. I'm not kidding. And there are experts that know the expert signatures and can even pick out a forged expert mark in the back. There's expert marks, there's owner marks. We generally will note if there's marks on the back. There is even some online databases of different marks for different experts in the time period and the type of stamps they did. But we will note that. I would say, generally speaking, more than half are legitimate and probably correct, but not nowhere near 100%. I would say it'd probably be more like 80-85%, generally speaking. But sometimes you don't even know exactly what they were saying. If there's 10 different varieties, there's an expert mark in the back. Which of the 10 varieties were they saying? I mean, some may have a catalog number written on the back too. But again, that could be from 100 years ago, and Scott may have completely renumbered. So that can't possibly be correct today. But yes, there are a number of experts, some of whom would use a rubber stamp, some of whom will basically put initials or some sort of mark. We don't do it, and we would note on the certificate if it has markings in the back. Some people would consider that a flaw. Some people would consider that good, especially. And when we know, for example, some of the early Italian state stamps, Deanna, I believe, is one of the experts whose mark would often be seen on that. We would indicate what expert that mark would be from when it's obvious. But some are just owner's marks, and who knows or who knows what significance that is either.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
That's a good question. Thank you.
What's the funniest thing that anybody's sent in to get expertise?
Oh, people have sent in things clipped out from an auction catalog with a picture of another stamp on the back. And I don't know whether they've never looked at the back or whatever. You know, the perforations are printed, not even, and it's like,
Go figure.
there's so we get some that it's hard to believe that the person can, common sense doesn't tell you that this is a picture, or um there are items that were done halftones or other things for publications, when you had to paste up and paste halftones in or whatever, and they're not even close to the right size. They may be 2 times the size of the real stamp. Um, and they may even have paste on their back, that you can see it was pasted onto something. There's a lot of things, not a lot, but I mean, maybe 2 or 3% of the items we get just are clearly, no chance in the world what they want them to be.
Ken, Eric again. Well, let me
Yeah.
ask you the opposite side of that. What was the oh wow one that you've seen?
We've occasionally found something, well, that's the earliest known use, or that there's very, very few known of. Most of the people, the owner, in most cases, the owner knows, but there would be, I don't know. I would say over the course of a year, 50 stamps may 50 or more stamps may come back as more valuable than what they submit them as. Now, some of them are intentionally submitting them as a more common variety, because they don't want to send in more money to start with. Um, some will even, who knows where some of them come up with the catalog values or whatever. I'm not worried about in that, but there are items that come back. And sometimes we may ask them to, would you consider doing an article in the AP, or you should share this with the Scott catalog, for consideration for a listing. An item that's not tagged, that's not listed untagged, that's not going to be particularly valuable probably, but maybe $500 or $1,000 or something, if there's no other copies known or whatever, even if it's a 1970s stamp that was previously not known, missing the tagging. So I can't say that we've had a $1 million stamp um, that somebody's submitted.
Yeah, no, just something that was like, oh wow to you,
Yeah, and we get them occasionally. Some of the owners prefer that, nothing be shared about it, because
okay.
some of them are private and they don't even want to be known as stamp collectors. Other ones of them want
Oh
to say,
yeah, no,
how can we get this listed in the Scott catalog? Um, so you have different reactions to it, and you have people who continue on for years and years trying to get things or prove things that they think is something that doesn't exist or whatever. And we may have different people look at several times over years as well. Not too often is it changed, but occasionally new information becomes available, and an opinion can change. We can issue a corrected certificate. If we think we got something wrong, we'll do a new certificate. If we need to, we'll pay the owner for the difference in the value.
Hmm.
But I mean, we basically take $1 from each fee as a self-insurance fund, and
Yep.
that's more than covered us for the time. It's the most of the time when we have to use the insurance fund, unfortunately, it's the Postal Service losing items in the mail.
Oh my.
That doesn't happen often, but that's by far the most often that something could happen. We've had 1 or 2 experts who've damaged a stamp. If we have maybe less than one a year, but we've had a case where something in our possession or in an expert's possession, where we've had to, give some remuneration to somebody for some damage to a stamp. But unfortunately, the most common thing is items in the mail, even though almost everything is sent at least certified, if not or registered or whatever. And you know, sometimes those eventually show up. Circuit Sales recently got something from like almost 20 years ago that just showed up in the mail. The owners were paid off a long time ago. They'll be sold, and that money will go to help replenish the insurance fund at this point. The few dollars that it'll generate for us.
Thank you.
That's an extreme case,
Yeah.
obviously. Anything else? You've all been very patient, on longer than you probably wanted, but thanks for your attention. If you have questions anytime, you're welcome to email Paul. I do hope to see most, if not all of you in September, at your Greater Houston Stamp Expo.
Thanks for
That
coming,
name
Ken,
roughly
and thanks
right.
for sharing.
You're most welcome.
Thank you.
One
Yes,
other question,
thank you.
Ken, before
We look forward to
before
seeing
we
you.
Stop the recording. Can you tell everybody who might watch this how they can join the APS?
The easiest way would be to join on the website at stamps.org. If they're going to join soon, we're offering basically a year and a half of membership for less than the regular year rate right now. So this would be June would be a great time, June 2025, depending when you're watching this. Would be a great time to get a great rate. I believe for like $25, roughly, you can get membership right now through the end of next year.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. That was wonderful.
Good.
Thank you, Ken.
You're welcome.